Do you want to introduce it, Bert, or shall I?
You go ahead, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for coming today to this Creating Safer Space Research Cafe. I think everyone's joined us before. If you haven't, the aim of the Research Cafe is to enable people in different parts of the world to exchange knowledge and to help build a community of researchers and practitioners on civilian protection, or UCP. This month, we have Professor Beatriz Arias from the University of Antioquia in Colombia, who will provide an introduction to using textiles as a participatory and creative research method. So thank you so much, Beatriz, for joining us today. And if you'd like to share your presentation, I think you can do so from your own computer.
Bueno, okay. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Let me start sharing my screen.
Ahí están viéndola bien.
Can you see my screen?
Sí.
Oh, listo.
Muy bien.
Bueno, entonces, primero que todo, buenos días.
Okay, first and foremost, good morning here in Colombia. It's early. It's almost 8 a.m. These last days have been rainy. This is our winter. It's 20 degrees. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. What we want to share with you today is about this experience where we have tried to gather some issues regarding textile making and the relationship or the connection that it has with research. I'm sorry, Berit, but I'm being told some people, apparently they cannot, some people who would like to attend this seminar cannot join us. Can you please help us with that? Okay, when we talk about textile making as a research method, we talk about multiple professions or jobs. And here we're talking about needlework, weaving, knitting, comforters or quilting, any job that involves needles, fabrics in different ways. These are some cultural traditions. Here in our case, in Colombia, they're very popular. And these traditions come from practices that are related to jobs or crafts that include making garments or for ornamental purposes, the things that we have at home. These are the textile making I'm talking about. We're not talking about high couture or design or the other things in fashion that we are familiar with. So this is what I mean by textile making. Basically, we find this practice and we have been developing it and we have been incorporating it into research for several years. It is related to this type of research. We have qualitative research, and we have found that textile making has an important place in qualitative research if we consider that it is aiming at inquiring about the experiences of people and the meaning that people provide to their own lives and their own experiences, because through qualitative research, we can get the voices of those people, we can hear them out when we are researching about a certain phenomenon. Because here we want to find answers to the questions that we ask ourselves during research. So we have found that these kind of jobs or professions can have an important place here, and also in the participatory research. And in other cases, this could be called militant research, in the sense that people carry a knowledge, and for research purposes, it becomes important. And at the same time, people are considered part of the research teams. They're not just informants that give us information to our questions, but they are part and parcel of this research, and they are co-researchers. And this also is highly related to what we call militant research, because sometimes this kind of research that we have been approaching from this perspective is not just trying to solve some questions with academic purposes, but they also want to um, answer these questions in order to uh, attain certain political goals. So this also has effect on transformation, on the groups that are participating, on their own social relationships, on their own structures at different levels. And here we have considered that these jobs have an important place due to the activism that they lead to. This is like the other thread where this universe is hanging from, on why including this kind of textile making in this research. The other type of research that we have found is anything that is related to arts. The art-based research is also linked to this participatory research. The idea is to see or to relate with these questions that we ask in research. And we are aiming at artistic expressions, aesthetic expressions that are related to this, with the interpretation that we have about social phenomena. So the qualitative research, participatory or militant research, and arts-based research. Here is where we find that textile making has a place, has its own place of being. So it can help us solve questions that has the perspective that this kind of research has. Basically, what we can create based on that is the following: an experiential and practical knowledge, in the sense that many of the questions that we answer or that we want to answer through textile making are questions that sometimes are difficult to answer with words. Sometimes they do not go through rational arguments or through very elaborate discourses in terms of arguments or justifications, but sometimes they just go through sensations and experiences that are difficult to translate into words. And perhaps it is possible to take to symbology, such as the one that is being proposed by textile making. I think this is very articulated to what we saw in our last session about drawing. Because remember, that we wanted to see how to represent certain ideas that we have, certain understandings and insights, and certain senses that we add to things. Remember that for those of us who were able to attend last session, how we were drawing things around or based on certain questions, and we were expressing in multiple forms what that question could mean to ourselves. And this goes on the same line because textile making is showing us that those things that we are experiencing, and sometimes they are just insights or knowledge, this textile making allows us to manifest this differently. And in that sense, we talk about tacit knowledge and embodied knowledge. Sometimes it is silent, sometimes it hasn't been named with words, it hasn't been put into words, but it doesn't mean that it is not there, because it is being built based on experiences that people have on their daily lives, and this provides a sense of reason, and it is there. This is why we call it tacit. Perhaps it is invisible, but it is there. And maybe these kind of methodologies will allow the emergence of this knowledge. And embodied, I understand that, or we understand this, embodied knowledge as something that goes through the body. It goes beyond rational arguments. It goes through feelings, affection, emotions. And as I was telling you before, sometimes we do not translate this into words very easily, but it is something that is embodied. It's like a footprint that it is manifested through those feelings and emotions. And in textile making, we can translate this from the tacit and embodied knowledge to the materiality that becomes something that has a social sense and a cultural sense. We have saying or a phrase that we use a lot, and we learned this from a colleague that has been participating in these processes with us. She says that the size of the thread goes from the heart to the hand. So I extend my hand, and that is the size of the thread that I need for needlework. But this metaphor from the heart to the hand is showing us the embodied knowledge that we have and how it is being translated to the hand as the main tool for textile making. And it becomes a materiality, and it is live, and it has its own dynamics. And this is what we want to show you through this presentation. In that sense, this kind of methodology allows us to build some languages that are different from the oral language: expressive language, iconographic language, symbolic language. And here we are making some drawings, and then we transform them into textile pieces. And even though we haven't worked under the perspective of art therapy, even though this is the intention when we conduct research with these methodologies, it is true that it can have a therapeutic effect. And this is what we have found in these research exercises, where we have found textile making. In general, people end up valuing not only what they were able to learn, but also the therapeutic effect from the personal reflection point of view, because they have an effect on their own understandings of what has happened to them. It is a therapeutic effect, and perhaps it can be a, it can become a healing process because it can relieve us from certain discomforts. So this is how we use textile making in research. I will also talk about the arguments. Although this textile making is a mediator in research, we do not conduct research for textile making. We conduct research through this textile making in order to answer questions that we have asked ourselves. It is also true that the textile materiality has an important place. This is not the purpose, but it becomes a core element as a research element. I don't know if you have any questions so far, or maybe at the end we can discuss them. Yes, maybe we can discuss the questions at the end. Where in the research process we have introduced this kind of methodology? Basically, in everything that is related to data production in the research. As I was telling you before, we produce visual, iconographic, symbolic data, and we also consider them text data in the sense that this textile making becomes a text that can be read in order to answer the question that we were asking during the research. So we can include textile making as the main purpose of the research. There are no other strategies, but we have also used it as a complementary purpose to other strategies. In addition to textile making, we also conduct focus groups, surveys, interviews, and other production strategies. So we have combined both possibilities. What we have found in these moments of data production is that when we use textile making, these encounters for data productions, and they are part of the qualitative research. And the idea is to understand that the data produced is a product of the encounter between researchers and participants of the research. We need to see who they are, where they come from, the space they have, or the role they play in the research. So under that perspective, which is a perspective that comes from the knowledge that is proposed by the qualitative research with a feminist touch, what we see is that textile making allows us to provide reliable and mutual care relationships. So it allows the production of other things. This is important for certain questions and research topics that have been important to us, especially the ones that are related to social suffering and trauma. And we have worked with this in the context of the armed conflict and after the agreement or the peace accords here in Colombia. And there are some sensitive questions from the emotional point of view. In the last work that we conducted, there was a legal environment because it had a meaning for the process that these people were experiencing. They had to be silent, or so there is a silencing that is not just a decision or a right to tell or not to tell things, but there are some silences that are strategic, and they go through the moment where a phenomenon is happening. And this happened to us after the peace accords. What could be said and what could not be said, and this is related to transitional justice, and it may have a different meaning for the people who were participating in the projects. So what we found is that in data production, in addition to having a data corpus, it also produces some sort of a relationship, because it is a bit different, and it allows some trust bonds that facilitate the flow of the conversation. So these questions can be asked easily because there is a sense of mutual care.
¿Por qué puede ser esto? Pues por múltiples razones, pero
And the reason behind this is mainly because textile making is cross-cutting to asymmetric relationships between researchers and participants. But here, being able to get closer with a common or popular livelihood or job, such as textile making, we know that we have inherited this kind of job, and it helps us being more cross-cutting, and this will produce these reliable relationships based on trust. We have also found that textile making has allowed us to develop reflexivity processes among the research teams. We were also able to experience this in a recent project that we had with Firmantes de la Paz and FARC. And it allowed us to experience our own emotions and sensations towards that research questions, because we also had some emotional elements there. And despite the fact that we had recognized this and we had acknowledged this and the position that we were taking to that research process, the why and the hows, I think this exercise, once we conducted this exercise, we were able to get closer to that reflexivity process. And later on, when I show you some pictures, I think we can broaden this. And Berit was also part of this project, and maybe later we can talk more about this. The other part where textile making becomes important is when we talk about disclosure, dissemination, and social appropriation. As I was telling you before, these textiles are not just detail that will be interpreted to get certain results, but these textile pieces become documents or testimonials that are used as a fundamental vehicle to circulate the results of the research. In that sense, they become collective memories and cultural artifacts. And the artifact is a materiality that can have a permanence over time. It can circulate, and it can have an additional meaning. In that sense, we have thought that the use of this textile artifact can be used to provide empathy and solidarity. After a research process, we have these textile materials and they are the ones that are gathering what we were asking in the research. So we distribute or circulate these artifacts so other people can get closer to certain realities and phenomena. And we think it's important to have a broader circulation of this kind of experiences and phenomena. And people have, we have been asking questions to people about violence and the results of the conflict. And here in Colombia, this has been done not just in Colombia, but in other places around the world. What we have seen is that it has an effect about building solidarity, communities, and more empathetic communities. This was essential to us for the peace accord. And we can also start circulating some reflections and questions for societies that are going through transition processes, such as the case of Colombia after signing the peace accords. Here we think when we talk about like disclosure, dissemination, and social appropriation, the textile methodology allows us to broaden these social appropriation dynamics. Later on, I will show, oh, I see something on the chat. Let me check the chat box. Later on, we can discuss these questions or comments. Let me show you some examples of pieces or projects where we have been using these methodologies. They have multiple possibilities. And I wanted to share with you from the experience that we've had certain exercises. In this case, we used dolls, fabric dolls. I think we are all familiar with fabric dolls. We work under the idea of thinking about the doll as an object, a textile object that will allow us to have an autobiographical reflection about our own life. This is a project that was called Links and Relationships that women farmers build. We were asking about their gender relationships inside these farmers organizations. These organizations were asking themselves a very important question about the matriarchal and patriarchal logics in Colombia, because people are claiming some farmers' rights, and perhaps the daily processes, we're having some strong patriarchal logics, and sometimes these women farmers had to carry with some emotional burden due to their leadership work there. So that tension or that dispute inside these farmers organizations helped us think and propose to these women how this question about being a leader, a female leader in those organizations, how it became a footprint. So we were asking them what had happened and how this embodied everything. So the doll could be a good strategy to talk about it. So here, what I bring you, I bring you some pictures. The one on the right, we see some sort of bodies. I think uh, this picture is very strong because it looks like a graveyard with bodies that are being piled up and their anonymity. But this is what we wanted to portray here. how those bodies start to have a positioning or an identity, and it starts to create a footprint. And I also bring two pictures of the product of this process. The one on the left is how these bodies, these anonymous bodies that lack identity, into themselves and who they think they are through those dolls, how they see themselves, how they see themselves in their social groups. So these are women from Pangui. They are sitting on the beach. This is a region in the Pacific in Colombia. We have Afro descendants here, Afro descendant communities, and they have a series of important jobs. So I won't talk much about this. So I just wanted to show you how these women have an identity in that social domain, and how I wanted to show you how that body that was anonymous has a voice, has a position through that autobiographical doll. The one on the right, this is a beautiful doll. I even have it here. This is an indigenous woman from Putumayo, which is another place here in the southern part of Colombia, close to the border with Ecuador. It is an anonymous body that acquired a different identity. This is one of the self-protection strategies that we have found here in Colombia. And this is what it means being part of the indigenous guards. This is a beautiful picture because this is when the time when she is giving me the doll. She's talking to the doll. She's saying goodbye to this doll, and she's telling the doll why she has to go, because it stops being a doll and it becomes herself with her voice, and she will go somewhere else and she will start telling women in Putumayo who they are. So this is an element that looks very simple, and it becomes a very powerful element or item to have these conversations or discussions, because it will be creating other conversations or additional conversations. So this is just an example of a textile piece. This is another type of a textile object. These are tapestries or wall hangings, because these wall hangings are a source, an important source where these ideas come from. These wall hangings were used by Chilean women during Pinochet's dictatorship. They just wanted to show what was happening in Chile. They are called wall hangings, or arpillera in Spanish. So here in Colombia, we don't call it arpillera, we call it tapestry, wall hanging, or even a piece of cloth. But I just wanted to highlight the origin or the source of these kind of textile piece. So this is something that we did with women farmers. We were asking them about the role they play in the community. And this is a piece that was made by 3 women, Azucena, Diana, and Luz. This was created in the 2015, and they were wondering or asking themselves what they do. And this is an important piece, and it's beautiful. You see, it is the same woman because they are wearing the same clothes. So What they want to represent here is what a woman does on any weekday, but it repeats or it goes over and over again. They take care of the children, they take care of the animals, the orchard, the house. They get up at 4 a.m. and they go to bed at 10. They are the first ones to get up and the last ones to go to bed. So the idea is to produce a collective reflection. And this is what our Colombian women farmers do. And I wanted to show you the importance that they have in our society. And the hair that these dolls have, it is their own hair, the artist's hair. So these are some hair strands, real hair strands. So you see, textile making allows creativity. We do not need expensive materials. It's just a matter of creativity. And it also has an important effect because these women were thinking that their hair is also a textile fiber. And this is called the life of a woman in the countryside. This is another type of piece. I think it's very interesting with the, it is also very interesting for the UCP. This was a piece that was used in a project that was called knitting or weaving with multiple hands. And the question was how women were thinking about their territories, how they were building their territories, how they were imagining their territories, and what were the memories of their territories, the memories they have built. And these are like very big models or quilts. So they were knitting the territory, and it was called my countryside, my territory, full of colors. So this is how they see the territory. This is how they express the conflicts in their territory. Here you can see no mining. These were very big textile pieces. And I think I've always been talking about women, so you may be wondering that maybe we can use this strategy only with women. The answer is no. We can use this with anyone who is encouraged to do so. And we know that maybe these kind of jobs that are more followed or performed by women. However, this kind of methodology can be applied to men as well. So this is not related to gender. This invitation is not just for women. Anyone can weave or knit or do some needlework. But due to the cultural characteristics of them, of this kind of meaning, women feel closer to this kind of activity. Here we have another piece that has a different technique. We already talked about the dolls and the tapestries. We also saw the cartography, which is the previous one, that he used 3D pieces and crochet. This is another type of technique. This is called fake patchwork. Here we do not use these threads. We use also polystyrene. Here we draw with a fabric what we want to express. This was conducted, or this was done in 2012. We were building with a community a timeline of their experiences with the armed conflict. This is a memory that starts in 1963 for them. Here you can see the dates here. There is a timeline: 1963, 1970, 1980, 1988 to 2000, and it ends in 2012. And in the horizon of that timeline, we see a series of stakeholders and actors. We have the martial operation, the National Liberation Army, or ELN, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC. We have the paramilitary movements. So here it says coca crops. This is how they were showing, or what were the symbols that they were using. What catches our attention is the size of the sun. This is a very intense armed conflict. This is what the timeline is showing us, but it is lit by the sun. And on the other corner, we can see a helicopter. So these elements are subject to interpretation. How to understand this big yellow sun in the middle of the conflict, on how people experience this conflict, and the meaning of this chopper. This chopper appeared in several pieces of this work. I'm only showing you one piece, but they made 14 pieces where they were telling what they were experiencing. And the helicopter was on several of these pieces. And there was a time, this is what they called martial operation, where the Colombian military forces had certain interventions. And there was a symbolic element that remained in their memories, was the helicopter. The helicopter where bullets were coming from. This not only happened in rural areas, but also in urban areas. So when you talk to them, even today, if there is a helicopter passing, they run away and they hide themselves because they are looking for a refuge. They still have this, and they were looking for shelter. So back then, they wanted to build mental health after this kind of conflict. So this is another type of textile element that uses a different technique. This was done collectively. This is another proposal. We call it textile books. It comes from the last project or latest project where Berit and I were participating. This is a project that was done with peace signatories or firmantes de la paz. And we were interested on a metaphor that was about unweaving looks. So this was a question that we thought we had to ask ourselves after the peace accords. So here we have that book. This is the cover of the book that is called Unweaving Looks. It gathers this proposal of textile books. Textile books are some sort of groupings that we do of textile pieces that were created by women and men. Here we had the participation of men, their relatives, their neighbors, and we were building this question: who they are, what have they experienced, what are their dreams, what are their stories, where they come from. Here we had a purpose, in quotes, to make more humane that subject that was not being humane. So there was a loss of identity when this person was called ex-combatant, and it was reduced to nothing. But they did have stories to tell. So as long as we were recognizing that voice, this encounter, this reconciliation encounter was possible.
Entonces, lo que les mostramos ahí fue que empezamos bajo la idea de libros textiles. Esto recoge también, digamos, ideas de la práctica narrativa, pero también toma ideas de la literatura para tratar de construir relatos cortos que a través de
short stories that through small books they can be read by other people, they can be interpreted. So this was called unweaving looks, tales, textile tales about reconciliation in Colombia. The technique is needlework by hand. It was very, the materials were very simple because we only need small pieces of fabric. I would like to show you this object that was also included. It is called Textile Resonances or echoes. So the idea is to reflect a bit more about this element. I think it is very powerful. We have been talking about it. And based on this exhibition, we invited people. When we were talking about empathy and solidarity in the communities, we were inviting people to ask, we were inviting people to tell us what these pieces were telling. This is what we called textile resonances. Here I wanted to show you how those people who attend an exhibition, in this case, also become participants of the research project, in the sense that they are also answering questions, and this is also interesting to us. In other words, we had some initial pieces that were made by firmantes de la paz, their relatives and neighbors, and we exhibit this publicly, and all those people that go there and interact with these pieces anonymously, they decide to respond to the piece through these needles, through needles and threads. And this is what we call textile resonance. Unfortunately, we had this for 7 months, but we weren't able to continue with this due to the pandemic. And however, many of the people who went to the exhibition left these pieces as a gift. And those are the pieces that you can see in the picture. They are a corpus of data that hasn't been analyzed because this exhibition was completed in last December. But this is very valuable because we need to, because it will provide us with an iconographic reading, and we will continue to replicate this in different cities around the world, around Colombia. So the textile has an important strategic value that enables this dialogue. It creates awareness, it provides education or pedagogy, because we understand that research needs to lead into some other processes in the society. It also has a therapeutic sense. This is not the core effect, but we know that it is there. And they also become memory materialities. When we were gathering these pieces in the book that I showed you, this was a question that we had. How these pieces that have very important testimonials, the first 5 years after the peace accords, here we can see them and interpret them. But maybe if we see them over time, if we filter them, and if we fine-tune them, they can become the materiality of memories and testimonials, and they can be reviewed over time by other researchers, other people that will give them a different meaning. In that sense, the peace preservation also took an important place when we use it with research purposes. This is a very short video that we created, and it shows the process of what we did in the last project. It is just music and images, and even though we do not speak the same language, music and images are a universal language. So I wanted to show you the video. This is the project Unweaving Looks.
No se escucha la música, Beatriz. No sé si es por el micrófono.
No se escucha. ¿Qué será?
We cannot hear anything.
Sí, quizás.
We cannot hear the music.
Tampoco.
We can't hear the music.
Tampoco se escucha. No sé por qué será.
We cannot hear anything. There's no music.
No se escucha tampoco.
¿Será que vos lo mostrás?
Can you please play it, or can you show it? Or maybe we can just see the images.
Y después pongo el enlace en el chat.
Yeah, maybe later I can paste the link on the chat box.
Eso, hagamos eso.
Okay, let's do that.
Me haces el favor.
¿Dónde está nuestro chat? So I've put the link to the little video into the chat. If you just click on it and watch it briefly and then come back, you also get the music, because for some reason we can't hear the music, and it's actually, I think, the nicest part about the little video. So if you could all go and have a look at the video, it's only some 5 minutes or 3 minutes or something, and then come back to the Zoom meeting, that would be great. A ver.
Bueno,
Creo que
ya
ya.
volvimos. Ya, listo.
Okay, now we're back.
Bueno, este video lo que mostraba
That
entonces
video
era el recorrido, un recorrido que
was
hicimos
showing
en este
a
último
journey
proyecto, digamos, cómo nos
in
encontrábamos,
the journey in our last
digamos,
project.
exponen esos
You were able to see how these elements, textile elements, are showed. So this is something relatively simple. We do not require big technologies. It's just a matter of taking some multiple materials. These are some fabrics that people weren't using anymore. Some people use old clothes. We also take these clothes there. Actually, in the work that I showed you about the timeline, we were working on that. We were working on building the memory on the textiles that we were reusing. Some people even took pieces of clothes of the people who had died in the conflict. So for research purposes, this can have this can lead to other important information. So the idea is to give some freedom to people. And any of us may have a certain material, or someone can be more knowledgeable. So the idea is to be sharing all these things. And this is what I wanted to show you with the video. Here I wanted to give you some screenshots of the articles or the papers that we have written with Berit and with people from Colombia, and you can have access to this information. Some other papers are in Spanish. This in Spanish, it's like going through the body and the needle. These are some methodological reflections for care intercultural research. This is brand new, crafting stories, making peace, creative methods of research. This was recently written by Berit. And the other one, the one about researching community care of life through plastic or visual arts. I think it has elements that are highly related to what we talked about today. And now, thank you so much for your attention. And I am open to your comments, questions. And thank you so much again. Thank you so much, Beatriz. People on the chat box are saying or several things.
Me fui porque quería mostrarles.
Ya, ¿estás de regreso?
Sorry. Are you back? Yes, I'm back. I just wanted to show you something. I wanted to show you this is a beauty. Look at this. This is the doll that the woman from Putumayo gave me. That story almost made me cry. This is the protections. This is a symbol of protection. All the she has all the ornaments. Everything has a meaning. Every aspect of her outfit has a meaning. Okay, I will be reading some of the questions in English, so Claudia can translate.
Where are we? So Celine is saying, for example, It is amazing how arts offer such amazing opportunities we can explore for research. So that was at the very beginning. Nerv makes a comment on silences. He says, very rich and powerful metaphor and information about silences as embodied by the weaving process. Celine says, again, thank you for making research such attractive experience. Rosemary, this is when you talked about the kind of textiles as also an artifact of memory, says, I love the idea of using textile as a collective memory and cultural artifacts. Great outcome indeed. Then I say, you make me cry. This story of the indigenous doll is very beautiful. Rosemary says it will be great to know how did the women discover textile weaving as a method of peacemaking. Then Marta Okumo asks whether we can share the links to the journals, and I can put something together. Oh, actually, it's on our website, isn't it? All the journal articles should be on our website, so I'll put the link in there. Nerv says, thank you, Beatrice, for your incredible and inspiring research and presentation. And there we are. So Ellen also says she is inspired. So if anyone has any specific questions about this method or about the work that Beatrice has done, please go ahead. And obviously you can ask in English because we have the interpretation.
Bueno, pero me gustaría, perdóname, Claudio, un minuto, me gustaría.
Sorry, I would like to answer a question that Rosemary is asking about how people make this appropriation. And I think this is something important, and we have been able to experience it because we know what it means when we as researchers, as external researchers do that. Sometimes we go through people and through opportunities, but regarding textile making, we have an experience about, remember the one about the life on the in the countryside? Azucena is, or she hadn't done any needlework before, but I think this became her language, and this was in 2015. And Azucena was last year was the core researcher in a process, and she conducted a very big process in her municipality, and she's been working very strongly in textile making. She incorporated this methodology. She made it her own, and last year we were also working with her, and she was leading the research. She worked with 4 big research groups, and she found a way to multiply this towards other people. So we have found that when we propose for certain people these tools, they become very interesting, these tools. And there is a possibility to broaden these gatherings or encounters because it gives it a new dimension to this profession, textile making, because sometimes it is only used at home. And when you add a new meaning of being able to provide testimonials through this textile making, some people take it, not just people in that community, but people from the academia, and it starts to have different dimensions. And I think this is an interesting effect that we have found. I don't know if Claudia will be speaking in English or in Spanish. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry that I showed up late, but I had a mixed up with the time. I wanted to ask you 2 things. First, I love this methodology. It is brand new to me. If I want to use it, what would be your advice, as a first-time user? And second, regarding the analysis. When you analyze the pieces, do you analyze the process, the final product, the end product, or both? How does it work? Claudia, I think the idea, this is about having experiences, and this is the biggest takeaway that we have from our last project, because if you haven't experienced textile before, it is very difficult to ask someone else to do it. And finding that language that from the rational point of view, you do not have the arguments, because this is more experiential. And the exercise that we conducted with weaving, the team had to do the needlework first, then knit and weave. And if you haven't done it before, you have to leave it. You have to use the material, and it's not just with some technical purity purposes. It's just to understand what it feels to do this. I think this is essential. From the analysis point of view, there are several things. One thing is that I use textile as the main purpose, and another thing is to use it as a complementary purpose. So if I use it as a complementary purpose, I can complement this with the stories or the tales that I have found in these people. So I can combine what I can interpret. Now we have a proposal, and I think this will be very enriching. A girl that studies philology, she joined the team recently, and she is proposing a way to read the textile from the semiotic point of view, and we didn't have this before, and we are still learning. We're learning from this young girl, and she has a very nice experience, and that's why she proposed other tools, because we do it more intuitively. We see images, colors, composition, and we need to combine this with what we were able to understand by being in the field. So we combine those things on the tail. But the piece by itself, for instance, I think what Camila will be proposing will be very interesting, and we're learning from her. This is also a matter of collective learning. Okay. Thank you so much, Beatriz.
Can I give an example also of how you can experience it? So I think, so what Beatriz was saying, that you should kind of try it yourself and try it around the question. It doesn't necessarily have to be the research question, right? So it helps reflection, of course, to think about how we relate to our research, but we can use it in any context, really. So the example I have in my office here, this is why I'm going to talk about this, is that a few years ago, we were all on strike in the university, striking for our pensions. So we were not teaching, but we wanted to do something interesting with colleagues, with students, and with the community. So we offered an embroidery session. So we just met with people who wanted to come to reflect on what the university means for us, what the strike means for us, and so on, what being an academic meant for us. So one of my colleagues, for example, Jillian, came up with this piece. Is like a children's game called Snakes and Ladders. So the game works in the way that whenever you get to a ladder, you can climb and you can kind of make a little shortcut in your life or in your career. But when you get onto a snake in this game, you slide down again. So all these different ladders, like you do your master's dissertation or you do your PhD, that's a ladder. Or you get onto a snake, for example, you submit a grant proposal for a research project, but it's rejected, and then you slide down again. So that's how she felt her career was, like a game of snakes and ladders, right? So it's not so simple, and there are always these things that that happen in between. Or some PhD students who just made this little picture of which is supposed to be a seagull, but it looks more like a goose, but it doesn't really matter. And they say PhD students in solidarity with the striking colleagues. So just kind of an expression of the moment. And I think it kind of really shows how any topic, it can help to reflect on any topic, because it takes the pace of normal life through the textile activity out of the thinking, and just gets people to really reflect on how they feel in the situation they're in. So yeah, so that was one interesting example. I at the time felt that academia was quite oppressive, so I made this octopus. So that's me up here, being strangled by this octopus, because I felt a lot was going on and it wasn't really what I wanted it to be. Yeah, so just as an example of what you can also do, it doesn't necessarily always have to be related to that research we are doing, but maybe just to our own situation. Are there any other questions or comments anyone would like to ask? I've put the link to, so most of the articles are linked on that website I put into the chat, but I think the most recent ones are not yet there, but we will have to update the website soon, and then you can see everything there.
Can I ask a question? I'm just wondering about the process of actually interpreting these artworks. I don't know very much about art, so I think I would perhaps find it quite challenging, but I'm just wondering, do your research participants ever find that you're interpreting their artwork incorrectly, that you're misinterpreting their artwork? Or you were mentioning towards the end that you hope that in the future other researchers might come and look at these artworks and might give different meaning to them. Are you ever worried that the participants might feel that they're giving the wrong meaning to this artwork?
Bueno, yo creo que ahí, Katia, hay como dos
Well, I
cosas.
think, Katia, there are two things there. First, there's a question. People answer through this textile piece. This is the way they interpret the question, okay? Which is the same when I ask a research question and the person tells me a story or a tale or through an interview and they tell me their perspective. So we know that what we do later is a secondary interpretation of that data. What I mean here is that the interpretation that we do as researchers will have to be, or will have to mirror the primary sources, because it goes through our own subjectivity processes. But we understand this in the qualitative research. We are not afraid because it happens. Anyway, what we do is that we return the process, and this doesn't happen in qualitative research as well. We return the preliminary results that you have with one interpretation to the primary sources. We will always do that. And obviously, for instance, what happened with unweaving looks, we conducted the process, we came up with certain pieces, and we had the exhibition when we were classifying this in textile books in the place where they were produced in Mutata, Antioquia. But what we found is that people were shocked and they said, oh, what I said is related to this? Oh, I hadn't thought about it. But not in terms of saying, I do not agree with this interpretation, but instead, I never thought that what I said would be related to this. And I think this can happen to any qualitative research or with any type of qualitative research method. But what's key here is returning this to the primary source. This is essential because it allows you to find if there is, if you are in tune, or if there is a big gap in what we interpreted as researchers. This is from the ethical point of view, which we need to keep in mind. when we say that they remain over time, we see it as a historical testimonial. But here the testimonial is iconographic and in textile form. But it is the same that happens with any textile piece that we see, let's say, from the Egyptians. Today, we have our own interpretation. Maybe when they created that piece, they had a different intent. So this is why maybe over time, these pieces will gain a different meaning, but this will be in a different time. It will never be the same. But I think when it comes to research, the returning the information to the primary sources is key. So information gets not distorted, knowing that these interpretations will always be different.
Brilliant, thank you so much.
Bueno, Berit, entonces creo que ya vamos cerrando.
Okay, Berit, it's time to wrap this up. Yes, we're running out of time. Berit, I don't know if you want to say something from your experience, because you were working with us in unweaving looks. Good morning, everybody. Well, I think Beatriz and Berit have talked a lot about this. My experience, as Beatriz was saying, I don't know anything about the textile world. I'm an anthropologist. I have been always working with qualitative research. So getting closer to the textile world was very interesting, because I was able to learn that through weaving and knitting, you can talk and express. And this has been quite a revelation, quite a breakthrough to me, because we have different possibilities to have other types of storytelling. So I'm still exploring. I consider myself an apprentice. And it is difficult sometimes to detach to what is regular to you, or to the things that are known or certain to you. I like it. I like this because I've been able to explore other things through fabrics and textiles, and this has been quite a breakthrough. And I want to continue exploring with the different groups of subjects that have experienced different things. And it gives you the possibility to incorporate it on your daily life. And you start exploring the beauty of producing an artwork that is related to your subjectivity. This is what I have experienced through this process. Thank you so much, Verena.
And so, Katja, do you want to say closing words, since you've opened the session as well?
We have not yet scheduled our next Creating Safer Space Research Cafe, but we will be providing information about it through our research newsletter. So please do sign up to the research newsletter if you haven't already, and I very much look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you so much, Beatrice, for today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.